Welcome to Romance Beyond the Porch.
I had already decided I wasn't going to go. That was the truth I kept repeating in my head all morning while flipping pancakes that came out uneven and slightly too dark on one side. I told myself it didn't make sense. I told myself blind dates were for people who still believed something new could happen. I wasn't one of those people anymore. But my daughter, Emma, was sitting at the kitchen table swinging her legs, watching me like she always did when she thought I was okay. She noticed everything. "Dad," she said softly, like she was trying not to break something fragile, "are you gonna go tonight?" I didn't answer right away. I kept my back to her, pressing the spatula into the pan like I could flatten the question out of existence. "I don't know," I said finally. That wasn't true. I knew exactly what I wanted to do: stay home, order pizza, pretend the world outside our little routine didn't exist. But Emma had that look again, the one that didn't belong on a 6-year-old's face. "You should go," she said. I turned around and leaned against the counter, studying her. "Why?" She shrugged, but it wasn't casual. It was careful, "Because you don't laugh as much anymore." That hit harder than anything else she could have said. I forced a smile. "I laugh." She tilted her head, not like before. There was no arguing with that, so I nodded like I had just made a decision. "Okay," I said, "I'll go." Emma smiled, small but real, and picked up her fork again like she had just fixed something important. But inside me, nothing felt fixed, not even clothes. I didn't believe in setups, especially not ones arranged by your boss, especially not when your boss was someone like Olivia Grant, CEO of Grant Systems, 37, sharp, controlled, and completely unreadable. I had been working contract projects for her company for about a month. It was supposed to be temporary, just code, deliver, leave. No attachment. That's how I like things. But Olivia had this way of seeing more than she should. She had noticed things I never talked about. The fact that I left exactly at 4 every day. The way I checked my phone at the same time each afternoon. The quiet, the distance. She never asked directly until 3 days ago. "You're not trying," she had said, standing beside my desk like she had every right to be there. I frowned. "Trying what?" "Life," she said simply. I didn't like how easily she said that, like it was obvious. "I'm doing fine," I replied. She studied me for a second longer than necessary. Then she said, "I don't think you are." And just like that, she moved on. I thought that was the end of it. It was. Later that same day, she came back. "I know someone you should meet," she said. I almost laughed. "I'm not really." "You're a single father," she interrupted calmly. "You work alone, you don't go anywhere, you don't meet anyone." There was no judgment in her voice, just facts, which somehow made it worse. "I'm not looking," I said. "That's the problem," she replied. Then she handed me a card with a restaurant name and a time. Saturday, 7:30. "That's not really your decision to make," I said, holding the card. She met my eyes. "You can say no." I should have, I didn't. Now it was Saturday evening and I was standing outside a restaurant called Lumiere, staring at my reflection in the glass. I looked fine. That was the best word for it. Not impressive, not confident, just fine. And that didn't feel like enough for something like this. I almost turned around. I really did. But then I thought about Emma's face at breakfast, and I walked in. The place was warm. Soft lighting, quiet conversations, the kind of atmosphere that made everything feel slower. I gave my name and they led me to a table near the window. 2 chairs, one already occupied by my nerves. I sat down and checked the time. 7:24, too early. I adjusted the glass in front of me, then adjusted it again. This was a mistake. I didn't do this anymore. I didn't sit across from strangers and pretend I knew how to start something. The last time I had been in a situation like this, I hadn't needed to try. She had already known me. We had grown into each other slowly, naturally. There had been no beginning like this. No pressure. No empty chair waiting to be filled. I exhaled slowly and leaned back. Just get through dinner, I told myself. That's it. One dinner, then back to normal. At exactly 7:32, the front door opened. I noticed it without meaning to. Something in the room shifted. It was subtle. A pause in movement, a slight change in attention. The kind of thing you don't see unless you're used to watching people. I looked up. And then everything inside me stopped. Because the woman who walked in wasn't a stranger. It was Olivia. For a second I thought I was wrong, that my brain had filled in the wrong face. But no, it was her. Same posture, same calm presence, but everything else was different. She wasn't wearing the sharp suits she wore at the office. She was in a dark green dress, simple but precise, like everything about her had been chosen on purpose. Her hair was down, and for the first time since I had known her, she didn't look like she was walking into a meeting. She looked like she was walking toward me. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I stood up halfway, then froze. She saw me immediately. Of course she did. Olivia didn't miss things. She walked straight over, steady and composed, like this was exactly how it was supposed to happen. Like she hadn't just rearranged my entire understanding of the evening. She stopped at the table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I let out a quiet breath and said, "You've got to be kidding me." She sat down across from me, smoothing her napkin like this was completely normal. "I don't joke about important things," she said. I stared at her. "You set me up," I said slowly. "Yes." "With yourself?" "Yes." There was no hesitation, no apology, just truth. I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. "Why?" She met my eyes, steady as ever. "Because I didn't trust anyone else to choose correctly." I let out a short, almost disbelieving laugh. "That's incredibly confident." "It's accurate," she said. I shook my head, looking down at the table for a second before looking back at her. "This is insane." "Is it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "You're my boss." "You're a contractor," she corrected calmly. "There's a difference." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" she asked. I opened my mouth to answer, and realized I didn't have one, not a real one, because the truth was I wasn't upset, I was unsettled. There was a difference, a big one. The waiter came over, breaking the tension just enough for both of us to breathe. We ordered, and then we were alone again. I looked at her across the table, really looking this time. At the small details I had ignored before, the slight tiredness in her eyes. The way her hands rested calmly, but not loosely. Like she was always holding something back. "You planned this," I said quietly. "Yes." "For how long?" She paused just for a second. "Long enough to know you'd say yes," she replied. I shook my head again, but there was something else there now, something I didn't want to name yet. "You don't usually do things like this, do you?" I asked. "No," she said. "Then why now?" This time her silence lasted longer. Not uncomfortable, just real. "Finally," she said, "because I noticed you." That landed somewhere deep. I didn't expect it, didn't know what to do with it. So I did the only thing I could. I stayed. And for the first time in a long time. I didn't feel like leaving. I didn't expect the night to last. That was the strange part. When Olivia sat down across from me, I thought I would finish dinner quickly, say something polite, and leave with whatever dignity I could gather. That was the plan I built in my head within the first few minutes. But plans don't always survive reality. And Olivia Grant was not someone you could reduce to a plan. The food arrived, and for a while we talked about safe things. Work. The project. Small details that felt familiar enough to stand on. But even those conversations felt different now. At the office, every word she spoke was precise, controlled, measured like it had already been tested before it left her mouth. Here, there was space between her words, room for something else, something softer. "You cook for your daughter every night?" She asked at one point, cutting into her meal with the same quiet focus she applied to everything. "Yeah," I said. "I try to." "Try." I smiled slightly. Sometimes it's more about effort than results. She glanced up at me, and for a brief second there was something close to amusement in her eyes. "I find that hard to believe," she said. "That I try or that I fail." I asked. "That you fail," she replied. I shook my head. "You haven't tasted my cooking." "I don't need to," she said. "You don't seem like someone who does things halfway." That should have felt like a compliment, but it didn't land like one. It felt like she was seeing something I had spent a long time trying to hide. "I used to be like that," I said quietly. Her hand paused slightly on the table. "Used to." I nodded, looking down at my glass. Before. I didn't explain. I didn't need to, she understood. I could see it in the way her expression shifted just slightly, like she had reached a door she wasn't going to push open without permission. So she didn't. Instead, she said, "You still are." I looked up at her. "No," I said, "now I just do what's necessary." There was a difference, and I had been living inside that difference for years. Olivia didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. She just watched me for a moment, like she was studying a problem she hadn't solved yet. The conversation changed after that, not suddenly, not in a way you could point to, but it shifted. The distance between us narrowed without either of us acknowledging it. We talked about Emma, about how she liked to draw on every surface she could reach, about how she believed pancakes tasted better when they were shaped like animals, even when they looked nothing like them. Olivia listened carefully, not politely, not the way people usually do when they're waiting for their turn to speak. She listened like it mattered, like Emma mattered. "She sounds bright," Olivia said. "She is," I replied, a little more firmly than I expected. "She notices everything." Olivia nodded slowly. "That can be difficult." I let out a quiet breath. "Yeah, it can." There was a pause, then she asked, "Does she ask about you?" I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "She asked if you were lonely, didn't she?" My chest tightened. I hadn't told her that, not directly. I studied her for a second. "How did you know?" Olivia didn't look away. "Because children don't ask questions like that unless they see something first." That was accurate, uncomfortably accurate. I leaned back slightly, exhaling. "Yeah," I said, "she asked." "And what did you tell her?" "That I was." "And was that true?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. Olivia didn't press further. She just nodded once, like she had expected that answer. By the time dessert came, something had changed. The tension that had filled the space between us at the beginning of the night had settled into something quieter. Not gone, just different, easier. We weren't strangers anymore, but we weren't anything else either. We were somewhere in between. And that felt dangerous in a way I hadn't prepared for, because in that space, things could grow, and I wasn't sure I trusted that. "Why me?" I asked suddenly. The question had been sitting in my mind all night. I needed to hear the answer. Olivia looked at me, her expression steady. "I already told you," she said. "I noticed you." "That's not enough," I said. "It is for me." I shook my head. "You run a company, you make decisions based on data, logic, risk. You don't just notice someone and decide to." I stopped myself. "To what?" she asked. I exhaled. "To do this." She considered me for a moment. Then she set her fork down carefully. "Do you think I don't understand risk?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. She continued anyway. "I understand it very well. I calculate it every day. I minimize it, I control it." Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it now, something real. "And this," she said, gesturing lightly between us, "is the opposite of that." I felt that. "Then why take it?" I asked. She held my gaze. "Because I'm tired of controlling everything," she said. That was the first time she had said something that felt unguarded. It caught me off guard. "You don't seem like someone who gets tired," I said. "I do," she replied. "I just don't show it." I believed that. I could see it now, in the small things. The way her shoulders relaxed just slightly when she leaned back. The way her voice softened when she wasn't speaking about work. She wasn't as untouchable as I had thought. She was just careful. We left the restaurant later than I expected. The night air was cool, quiet, almost still. We stood outside for a moment, neither of us moving right away. "This was," I started, "unexpected." She offered. I nodded. "Yeah." She glanced at me just briefly. "Regrettable." I hesitated. That was the moment. The easy answer would have been yes. It would have closed everything neatly. Safe, contained, but I had spent too long living inside safe and contained, and I knew exactly what it felt like, so I shook my head. "No," I said. Something in her expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. "Good," she said. We stood there for another second, then I said I should get home. "To Emma," she added. I nodded. She stepped back slightly, creating just enough distance to make leaving possible. "I'll see you Monday," she said. That sounded normal. Work, routine, like tonight had never happened, but it didn't feel normal anymore. "Yeah," I replied. I turned to go, took a few steps, and then stopped. I don't know why. Maybe because something in me didn't want to leave it like that, so I turned back. She was still there, watching me. Not in a demanding way, just waiting. "For what it's worth," I said, "this wasn't a bad decision." A small smile touched her lips. Real, quiet. "High praise," she said. I smiled back, and then I left. When I got home, Emma was still awake. She was sitting on the couch with a blanket, pretending she hadn't been waiting. I smiled when I saw her. "How was it?" she asked immediately. I sat down beside her, pulling her close. "It was," I paused, "different, unexpected, real. Good," I said finally. Emma beamed. "I told you," she said. I laughed softly. "Yeah," I said, "you did." But as I sat there with her, I realized something I hadn't expected. For the first time in a long time. I wasn't just going through the motions. Something had shifted, and I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing: I wasn't ready to walk away from it. Monday didn't feel like a normal Monday. I told myself it would. I told myself I would walk into the office, sit down at my desk, open my laptop, and everything would go back to what it was before. Simple, professional, distant. That's what I expected. That's not what happened. The moment I stepped onto the floor at Grant Systems, I felt it. Not something obvious. Nothing anyone could point at, but something had shifted. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the way I noticed things now. The quiet conversations that paused when I walked past. The glances that lasted just a second too long. The subtle awareness in the room that hadn't been there before, or maybe it had always been there, and I just hadn't cared enough to see it. I walked to my desk, set my bag down, and opened my laptop like always. Routine. That was my anchor, but even that felt different now, because I knew at some point I was going to see her. I didn't have to wait long. About 10 minutes later, the energy in the room shifted again. This time, I didn't need to look up to know why. Olivia had arrived. I kept my eyes on my screen for a moment longer than necessary, pretending to read something that didn't matter. Then I looked up. She was walking across the floor just like she always did. Same steady pace, same composed presence, same Olivia, but not the same, not to me, not anymore. She wasn't just the CEO now. She was the woman who had sat across from me in a quiet restaurant, who had looked at me like I was something she had chosen. And that changed everything. Her gaze moved across the room, quick and efficient. Then it landed on me and stopped, just for a second, not long enough for anyone else to notice, but long enough for me. There was no smile, no acknowledgement, just awareness. Then she looked away and kept walking, like nothing had happened. Like everything had. The day went on like that, normal on the surface, different underneath. We didn't speak, not once, not directly, but I could feel her presence in the room, every time she passed by. Every time her voice carried from a meeting room nearby. Every time I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass walls. It was distracting, not in a loud way, in a quiet, constant way, like a thought you can't quite shake. Around lunchtime, Marcus dropped into the chair across from me. He looked uncomfortable. That wasn't unusual for Marcus, but this felt different. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice. "Can I ask you something?" I leaned back slightly. "Sure." He hesitated, then said, "Are you involved with her?" I knew exactly who he meant. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at him carefully. "Why would you ask that?" I said. Marcus glanced around like he didn't want anyone to overhear. "Because people are talking," he said quietly. There it was. Of course there was. I felt something tighten in my chest. "What kind of talking?" I asked. He shifted in his seat. Nothing direct, just comments. "Like what?" Marcus hesitated again. Then he said, "That maybe you're getting close to her for a reason." I stared at him. "For a reason?" I repeated. He nodded, clearly not comfortable. "You know, positioning, opportunity." I let out a slow breath. There it was. The story people wanted to tell, the easiest version of it. I shook my head slightly. "That's not what this is." "I didn't think it was," Marcus said quickly. "I just thought you should know." I nodded once. "Yeah," I said, "thanks." He gave me a small, uncertain look. then stood up and walked away. I sat there for a moment, staring at my screen without seeing it. I should have expected this. Of course I should have. Nothing stays simple when other people get involved. Nothing stays clean. And suddenly something that had felt real now felt complicated. I didn't plan to go see her, but by the end of the day I knew I had to. Not because of the rumors, not because of what people were saying, but because of what I needed to say. It was late when I found her. Most of the office had cleared out. The lights were dimmer, the space quieter. She was in her office, standing by the window looking out at the city. She didn't turn when I knocked lightly on the door. "Come in," she said. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. For a second I just stood there, watching her. She looked exactly like she always did in this space. Strong, controlled, untouchable, like the version of her from the restaurant had never existed. "Something wrong?" she asked without turning. I took a breath. "I heard something today," I said, that got her attention. She turned slightly, just enough to look at me. "And?" she asked. "People are talking," I said. She didn't react, not visibly. "They will," she replied calmly. That was it, no surprise, no concern, just acceptance. "That doesn't bother you?" I asked. "It's irrelevant," she said. "It's not irrelevant to me," I replied. That made her turn fully. Now she was facing me, really facing me. "Why?" she asked. I stepped closer, not aggressively, but with purpose. "Because I won't be your secret," I said. The words came out steady, clear, and once they were out I couldn't take them back. The room went quiet. She held my gaze and I could see it now. The calculation, the way she processed everything, every angle, every outcome. This wasn't just about us to her. It was about the company, her position, control. "I didn't ask you to be a secret," she said. "You didn't ask me to be anything," I replied. "That's the problem." Her expression didn't change much, but something in her eyes did, something sharper. "You knew what this was," she said. "No," I said, "I didn't." That landed. I could see it. Because for the first time she didn't have an immediate response. I stopped, searching for the right words, then I found them. "I thought this mattered." Her silence stretched. Not cold, not dismissive, just heavy. "It does," she said finally. "Then act like it," I replied. The words came out stronger than I expected, but I didn't take them back. I couldn't, because they were true. For me, this wasn't something casual. It wasn't something I could just fit into the edges of my life. I had a daughter. I had a life that didn't allow for half choices, and I wasn't going to stand in the shadows of hers. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said nothing, and somehow, that was the answer. I nodded slowly. "I understand," I said. I turned toward the door. "Elia's." Her voice stopped me. I didn't turn around right away, then I did. She was still standing in the same place, but something about her felt different, less certain. "I don't make decisions impulsively," she said. "I know," I replied. "That includes this," she added. I held her gaze. "Then take your time," I said quietly. "But I won't wait in a place that doesn't exist." Her jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, in restraint. I gave her one last look, then I walked out. The next few days felt empty. Not dramatic, not painful in a loud way, just quiet, flat, like something had been there and now it was. I went back to my routine. Work, home, dinner with Emma, helping her with homework, listening to her stories, smiling when she smiled. But there was a part of me that felt missing, and I couldn't ignore it. Emma noticed, of course she did. "Are you okay?" she asked one evening while we sat on the couch. "Yeah," I said. She looked at me carefully. "You don't look okay." I smiled faintly. "I'm fine." She leaned her head against my arm. "Is it because of her?" she asked softly. That caught me off guard. I looked down at her. "How do you know about her?" I asked. She shrugged. "I just do." I let out a quiet breath. Kids always do. "Maybe a little," I admitted. Emma was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I liked her." That hit harder than I expected. "I know," I said. "Is she coming back?" she asked. I hesitated. "I don't know," I said honestly. Emma nodded slowly. Then she asked in a much smaller voice, "Did she leave because of me?" That stopped everything. I turned fully toward her, taking her hands gently. "No," I said firmly, "not even a little." "Promise?" she asked. "I promise." She studied my face for a second, then she nodded like she believed me, at least enough. But I knew something in her had shifted too, and that stayed with me. Back at the office, Olivia was exactly what she had always been. Focused, sharp, distant, if anything more controlled than before, like whatever had happened between us had been sealed away, handled, managed. But every time I saw her, I knew that wasn't true because I could still feel it. And I knew she could too, she just didn't know what to do with it. Yet, the silence didn't last forever. It never does. Even the strongest walls eventually show cracks. I just didn't expect the crack to come from her. It was Thursday evening when I heard a knock on my door. Not a loud knock, not urgent, just deliberate. I opened it without thinking too much. And there she was, Olivia, standing on my porch like she had every right to be there, but she didn't look like the Olivia I knew from the office. She wasn't perfectly composed, she wasn't untouchable. She looked human, tired, like she had been carrying something heavy and had finally decided to put it down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside immediately. "Yeah," I said, "of course." Emma was at the kitchen table, drawing like always. She looked up when we walked in. Her eyes went straight to Olivia, and for a second she just stared like she was checking something. Then she smiled, a small one but real. "Hi," Emma said. "Hi," Olivia replied softly. There was something different in her voice, gentler. Emma looked between us, then back at Olivia. "You came back," she said. Olivia nodded once. "I did." Emma seemed to accept that. She picked up a marker and held it out. "Do you want to help me?" she asked. Olivia hesitated for just a second, then she walked over and sat down beside her. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that." I stood there for a moment watching them, watching how easily Emma let her in, watching how carefully Olivia stepped into that space, like she knew it mattered, like she didn't want to get it wrong. And something in my chest shifted, because this wasn't small, this wasn't casual, this was real. A few minutes later, Emma got up to grab something from her room, leaving us alone in the kitchen. Olivia stood up slowly. She looked at me, really looked at me. "I handled it wrong," she said. There was no hesitation, no defense, just truth. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed lightly. "Yeah," I said. She nodded, accepting that. "I've spent years controlling everything," she continued. "Every outcome, every risk, every variable." I stayed quiet. She took a small breath. "And when something doesn't fit into that, I try to manage it the same way." "And that doesn't work," I said. "No," she replied, "it does." There was a pause, then she stepped a little closer. "I didn't want to hide you," she said. "I wanted to protect what this is before it became something the world could damage." I studied her. "That's not protection," I said quietly. "That's distance." She didn't argue because she knew I was right. "I know," she said. That word mattered because she meant it. We stood there for a moment, the space between us smaller now, not gone, but not as wide as before. "I don't do halfway," I said. "I know," she replied. "I have Emma," I continued. "I have a life that doesn't allow for something uncertain." She nodded slowly. "I understand that." "Do you?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Yes," she said, "because I don't want halfway either." That landed, different from before, stronger. "I just didn't know how to do this without losing control," she added. I let out a quiet breath. "You're going to lose control," I said. She gave a small, almost amused exhale. "I'm starting to realize that." I stepped closer now, not much, just enough. "That's the risk," I said. She held my gaze. "And you think it's worth it?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I glanced toward the hallway where Emma had disappeared, then back at Olivia. "Yes," I said. "Do you?" She asked softly. There was something vulnerable in her voice now, something real, and that changed everything. "Yeah," I said. "I do." Emma came back into the kitchen a second later, holding another drawing. She looked at both of us, then smiled like she knew something she didn't need to explain. "I made this for you," she said, handing it to Olivia. Olivia took it carefully, like it was something important. It was a messy drawing, 3 stick figures, one taller, one medium, one small, holding hands. "This is you," Emma said, pointing. "And this is Dad." Then she pointed to the third one. "And this is me." Olivia looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "It's perfect." Emma smiled proudly and ran off again, leaving us standing there, again, but this time it felt different, lighter, clearer. "I can't promise this will be easy," Olivia said. "I'm not looking for easy," I replied. She nodded. "I can promise I won't hide you," she said. "That's a start," I said. "And I won't treat this like something I can control," she added. I raised an eyebrow slightly. That one might be harder. A small smile appeared on her face. Real, warm. "I'll learn," she said. I believed her. Not because she said it, but because she was here. That mattered more than anything. We stepped outside onto the porch later that evening. Emma was in the backyard, drawing with chalk on the concrete. The air was calm, quiet, peaceful. Olivia stood beside me, looking out at the same small world I had built over the past few years. "This is your life," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "It's different," she added. I glanced at her. "Different how?" She thought for a second. "Real," she said. That made me smile. "Yeah," I said, "it is." She looked at me then, not like a CEO, not like someone measuring outcomes, just like a woman. "This time," she said softly, "it's not a setup." I shook my head slightly. "No," I said, "it's a choice." She reached for my hand, and this time, I didn't hesitate. Emma laughed in the background, her chalk scraping against the ground as she added something new to her drawing. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how complicated things might get. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of that, because this wasn't something arranged. It wasn't something controlled. It was something chosen, and that made all the difference.